So much talk about what went down at the NATO summit in London this week. Here's Trump's version. Love that music. It's almost like a movie trailer. It appears Trump is admired by all the allies. He's in the center of every shot. He posted that video on Twitter. What it doesn't show is the Queen not shaking his hand, and it certainly doesn't show this. Yep, that famous moment, Prime Minister Trudeau caught on a hot mic joking about Trump, turning a photo op into a 40-minute news conference. Trudeau's moment, it made headlines all over the world. It was even the opening of Saturday Night Live, where Trump is banned from the cool kids table. Jimmy Fallon plays Trudeau.
Hey guys, is this seat taken?
Sorry, actually it is.
Yes, we would love to see you talk and chew at the same time, but we promised this seat to a friend.
Well, I'm Boris's friend, right, Boris?
Don't make this harder than it already is, old
They were laughing at him on SNL, and that theme got picked up in a new political ad, too.
Several world leaders mocking President Trump.
They're laughing at him.
Yep, that was Joe Biden's new campaign ad saying the world is laughing at Trump. And it's got close to 12 million views on Twitter alone. Trump has made it pretty clear how he felt about Trudeau's comments.
Have you had a video of Prime Minister Trudeau talking about you last night?
Well, he's two-faced.
Do you think that Germany is too naive?
And honestly, with Trudeau, he's a nice guy. I find him to be a very nice guy.
But you know, here's the thing. Diplomacy is often about being two-faced, keeping a poker face in front of the cameras and saving the blunt talk for behind closed doors. But Trump, well, he's changed the rules. He's not two-faced. Yes, reporters have made careers out of fact-checking his lies, and he does call people names, but he does it all in public, in news conferences or often on Twitter. He called Theresa May foolish, Emmanuel Macron he calls nasty, and Trudeau weak and mild. It's a similar story playing out in the impeachment case, where again, Trump plays by his own rules. The Democrats accuse Trump of abusing his office by calling on the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. But Trump doesn't even pretend that's not true. He says it was the right thing to do.
That call was perfect. It couldn't have been nicer.
Folks were saying such lies, such horrible things about a call that was so innocent and so nice.
Calls that we made, two of them were absolutely perfect calls.
Joining me now is former speechwriter for President Bush, David Frum, and he is author of the New York Times bestseller, Trumpocracy, The Corruption of the American Republic. In the old days, diplomacy, you could even say it was two-faced, that you were one thing in private and you were another in public. People liked that. Trump's brand of diplomacy, we saw at NATO, very different. How would you describe his diplomacy, or lack of?
Well, his diplomacy is a series of demands that are mostly very self-interested. That's what we're seeing in Ukraine, that Trump has no conception of any public interest or government interest. The purpose of the government is for him to use it as if he were, as if he inherited it, as if it were some possession that his father had bequeathed him. So as his ambassador to the to EU, Gordon Sondland said, what Trump cares about is things that benefit him. And that's one of the reasons he gets on so badly with the Democratic allies. It's available to China before a meeting with Trump to expedite 40 or 50 copyrights or trademarks for Trump's family. Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister of Great Britain, a Chancellor of Germany, they can't do that.
But we've seen the State Department is now issuing his tweets. We've seen his tweets affecting the world. Is he changing? Is he now, do we now have diplomacy by Twitter because of Trump?
We have diplomacy by plot, scheme, and tweet. Look, the official policy of the United States is to help Ukraine become a democratic country and to support Ukraine against Russia. But the real policy of the United States was exactly the opposite. And in area after area, the reason we have government by Twitter is because the rest of the government has no idea what President Trump is going to do, partly because President Trump, 5 minutes before, has no idea what he's going to do.
You can say that, and yet he has this massive support. He could even be reelected. He could not be removed from office. Something's working.
He doesn't have massive support. He's got a solid minority, and because the American electoral system is so lopsided, his 42% of the country has more voting power than the 50% of the country that is opposed to him. So it's not impossible that he could be re-elected through the mechanism of the Electoral College. But if he is re-elected, he's going to have an even bigger popular vote deficit than last time. Last time he lost the vote by 2.9 million. I think he's on his way to losing the popular vote by 4 million in 2020.
But you wrote this week that for the impeachment hearings, where there are sort of similar themes playing out, that there has to be a show.
Yes.
He is a show. Is it working?
Well, the televised impeachment hearings need to help the public understand what's at stake. And in the Intelligence Committee hearings headed by Representative Adam Schiff, that was done very successfully. You could see the factual record. You could see President Trump manipulating U.S. foreign policy to his own advantage. The hearings, the public hearings in front of the Judiciary Committee, that was the committee headed by Jerry Nadler of New York, those were less successful. I think for the witnesses, it was a lot of fun to be on national television, but I think it was harder for people watching at home to understand what was being talked about.
It's interesting, though. I read the Washington Post a couple of days ago, and it's arguing that Justin Trudeau is the one who is obnoxious and arrogant, and that sort of almost a rejection of the old way of diplomacy. There's always been cliques sort of giggling about somebody else on the side.
Yeah. Well, that moment was pretty careless of Prime Minister Trudeau. He is a person of the modern age, and he should know that there's private, and then there are press gaggles. And when there are press gaggles, that there are microphones and microphones and smartphones. One of the successes of Prime Minister Trudeau's first term was that he did manage the Trump relationship, which is a very challenging relationship to manage, in a very disciplined way. He did not allow the people around him to be recorded saying derogatory things. And the point is not whether it's true or whether Donald Trump deserves it. The point is, can Canada afford the revenge that President Trump is now going to exact? So
you think there will be? You think there will be revenge now?
That's for sure. I mean, that's the only way Trump operates. He doesn't care about trade or things like that. He cares about his own ego. Trudeau has insulted his ego. Now Trudeau is being featured prominently in Joe Biden ads. Donald Trump will exact a price for that.
So are you talking about trade? Or what? More insults?
All kinds of harassment. There'll be all kinds of harassment issues. It's such a complex relationship. As we've seen with the releases of these call records from Ukraine, that Donald Trump spends his time not thinking about what a president can think about, but how does he get petty revenge on people who have crossed him. That's what his brain is consumed with.
And you think that the next president, whoever that may be, can change this back to the way things were?
Well, I hope the next president will change it. I'm hopeful that the next president will do the utmost to change it. But people will remember that the idea that the United States could be governed in this way, you can never exclude it as a possibility for the future. When something has happened, you know it can happen.
As always, fascinating to talk to you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
David Frum in Washington. Also here with another perspective on all of this is Colin Robertson. He is a longtime Canadian diplomat who, among other postings, held a senior position in Canada's embassy in Washington and was an advisor on several free trade agreements. He is in Ottawa. So, Colin, you've seen a few things, been behind the curtain here. You've seen what happens in foreign offices or chanceries. What do you think? Is Donald Trump and his use of Twitter changing diplomacy?
Absolutely. Every chancery, whether we're talking democracies or non-democracies, are now they are on a kind of 24/7 watching what's going on, not just in the classic diplomatic note back and forth, but what's taking place in the Twitter sphere. We have to be aware of that. It's like the old newswire that you had to be watching. This now has direct impact on business because leaders leave a room and they'll send out a tweet. That becomes the means by which we often find out information in a kind of real-time basis, and then we're expected to react in real time. That's hard.
So, I mean, can we go back, or have we entered diplomacy by Twitter?
I don't think there's any going back. I think we're now diplomacy by Twitter is going to be how we do business, and it means that foreign services have to be much more agile, and the ability to respond quickly is now a premium on that. Unfortunately, what gets lost in that, or lost in the translation, is analysis and judgment. But it is obliging us to, I say, do business differently.
We saw Donald Trump call Justin Trudeau two-faced. The Washington Post today is calling him arrogant. He's following the old rules of diplomacy where you're polite in person. Whose way is working?
Well, certainly Donald Trump's way is forcing others to react. again, I think it's a kind of debasement of diplomacy and civilized behavior, but it's you have to respond, especially when it comes from the President of the United States. If this were some tin pot dictator from some smaller place, I don't think it would matter. But because it comes from the President of the United States, it changes the game.